He used to lock the bedroom door, even when I was still inside. I'd hear the sharp click of the key turning, and he'd say he needed space. Sometimes I'd sit on the floor for hours, back against the wall, afraid to move, afraid to breathe, afraid to make it worse. Other times he'd just walk past me like I wasn't even there, closing the door slowly behind him, like he was burying something that disgusted him. I was that something. His name was Daniel, and I could tell when he was upset by the way his breathing changed. He didn't need to yell. His silence screamed. The silent treatment was his favorite weapon. After every little disagreement, I'd get days of cold punishment. No answers, no glances, no touches. If I asked what was wrong, he'd scoff or smirk and say, "You know what you did," but I never knew. And that constant confusion kept me trapped. In the kitchen, I tried to do everything the way he liked. Coffee in the black mug, toast extra crispy, no margarine. If I got it wrong, the wrong mug, the wrong toast, the wrong napkin, he didn't have to say a word. That look was enough, that chilling silence between us. The psychological abuse hid in tiny details, so subtle that I started to believe I was the problem, that I deserved the coldness, that I needed to improve, obey, shut up. One night, during dinner with friends, I was telling a silly childhood story. In the middle of my sentence, he cut me off and said, laughing, "Here she goes again with her useless memories. Nobody cares, babe." Everyone laughed. I smiled too, on the outside, but I was bleeding on the inside. "You're too sensitive," he whispered in my ear when he noticed my voice shaking. That was the moment I realized that emotional abuse can happen in front of people and still go unnoticed. The control was quiet, but complete. He chose my clothes, criticized my coworkers, questioned every text I sent. If I replied too slowly, I got silence. If I replied too fast, I got contempt. I lived on a landmine. Every step was a new opportunity for manipulation. "You're lucky I put up with you," he'd say, and I believed it, because he made sure to remind me, every single day, that I had no value without him. That's how narcissistic abuse works. It hides behind fake concern, behind so-called tough love, but deep down, it's a hunger for control, a need to erase who you are. I was just a victim trying to understand why the person who claimed to love me made me feel so invisible. The truth came slowly, between bathroom sobs and sleepless nights staring at the ceiling. Daniel was a narcissist, cold, calculated, an expert in gaslighting. I started to question my own sanity. I thought maybe I was too emotional. He'd say I was overreacting, that I was too hard to handle. And me, I apologized for existing. "You ruin everything with your personality," he'd repeat. And each time I heard it, a piece of me disappeared. It was a toxic relationship, where the trauma piled up in silence. No bruises, but wounds that never closed. The moment that never left me was the night he turned his back in bed and didn't say a word. I tried to touch his foot with mine, to get some small crumb of connection. He pulled away like I was something filthy, like my presence was a mistake. I curled up on my side and cried without making a sound, terrified that he'd hear me and call me weak. "If you can't handle this, then leave," he said once casually, knowing I had no strength to go. Being with a narcissist means getting punished for feeling anything. You end up apologizing for breathing. To this day, I still hear his silence inside me, an echo I can't turn off. I stayed quiet for so long that even now, alone, I still censor myself. And sometimes, when someone asks if I'm okay, I smile and lie. There was a morning when I stood in front of the bathroom mirror for 20 minutes, just staring at my own reflection, trying to remember who I was before him. I didn't recognize the woman looking back. Eyes dull, shoulders hunched, mouth too tired to even frown. I had stopped wearing lipstick. He said it made me look desperate. I had stopped wearing perfume. He said it gave him headaches. I had stopped talking on the phone with my sister. He said she put ideas in my head. Every day felt like I was walking underwater, pushing through something heavy and invisible. I was surviving inside a home where I was supposed to be loved, but it felt more like I was being punished. And still, I kept trying to win his affection, like some sick game I didn't realize I had been forced to play. That's the cruelty of narcissistic abuse. It turns your need for connection into a weapon against you. There were nights he wouldn't come home. No warning, no message. I'd lie in bed, staring at the door, heart racing with questions I didn't dare ask. When he finally walked in at 3 or 4 a.m. smelling of beer and arrogance, I'd get nothing but a cold glance and a muttered, "Don't start." If I asked where he was, he'd twist it on me. "So now you're the jealous type?" Wow. Pathetic. It was gaslighting at its finest. The way he turned my pain into a flaw. The way he'd storm off and not speak to me for 2 days. Another round of the silent treatment, just because I needed reassurance. The scariest part wasn't the yelling. It was the coldness. That clinical, emotionless way he could go from baby to stranger in seconds. The kind of psychological abuse that makes you second-guess your reality. I'd apologize even when I didn't know what I did wrong. I'd beg him to just talk to me. And every time he'd stare through me like I didn't matter. Like I was a nuisance. He had a way of making me feel like I was crazy. If I cried, I was unstable. If I got quiet, I was manipulative. If I spoke up, I was dramatic. Every reaction became more proof that I was the problem. "You twist everything," he'd say. But the only one twisting was him. Twisting words, twisting meanings, twisting me. One afternoon, I came home early and found him sitting on the couch, laughing at something on his phone. When he saw me, his face dropped. He hid the screen instantly. I didn't say anything. I never did. But I felt the ice crawl up my spine. Later that night, when I finally asked if there was someone else, he smiled. Not kindly, smugly. "You're really going crazy, aren't you?" Then he laughed again and walked away. They don't break you with violence. They break you with silence. You keep waiting for the person you fell in love with to come back. But he never existed. There was no single moment when I decided to leave. It was thousands of tiny cuts. A look here, a phrase there, a door slammed, a birthday forgotten, an apology withheld. It was the exhaustion of being punished for loving him. It was the growing ache of knowing I was slowly disappearing inside a toxic relationship designed to keep me small, quiet, and afraid. But the hardest part was realizing I had stayed because I wanted to be enough for someone who needed me to feel worthless. That's the twisted design of emotional abuse. You don't stay because you're weak. You stay because you believe if you just love them enough, they'll stop hurting you. They never do. And now, even though he's gone, I still flinch when I hear keys in a lock. I still hesitate before speaking, afraid my words will be used against me. I still struggle to trust kind gestures. I'm still trying to untangle myself from the web of manipulation and control he spun so masterfully around my soul. Some nights, I catch myself staring at my phone, like I used to when I waited for his texts. But the difference is, now, there's no one coming. And strangely, that hurts less. I wish I could say I've healed. I haven't. Not fully. I still carry him like a shadow behind my eyes. And I still wonder, if I screamed now, would anyone finally hear me? The silence didn't leave when he did. It stayed. In my chest, in my kitchen, in the spaces where his voice used to echo, whether with charm or cruelty. I no longer live under his roof, but I still flinch when a man raises his eyebrows, when someone sighs too loudly, when I hear footsteps that sound too heavy. That's what narcissistic abuse does. It trains your body to expect the blow even when the room is empty. I thought leaving would set me free, but the trauma followed me like a second skin. I couldn't pick out clothes without hearing his voice. "You're too old to wear that." I couldn't post a photo without imagining his comment. "Thirsty much?" Even eating became complicated. I had stopped ordering dessert because he used to say it made me look greedy. "Women like you don't have discipline," he once whispered at a dinner table with friends, and I laughed, pretending I wasn't shattered. You see, the abuse wasn't loud. It was quiet, subtle, precise, like a scalpel carving away pieces of me, my self-esteem, my confidence, my instincts. I was a victim of a narcissist who never hit me, never screamed, never left bruises. He just erased me. One day I tried to explain it to a friend. She asked if he'd cheated, if he'd yelled, if he'd ever gotten physical. When I said no, she looked confused. So what did he do then? And that's the worst part. Trying to explain how emotional abuse can feel like being set on fire with invisible flames. How you start to gaslight yourself. How you start to think, maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe I'm the narcissist. Maybe I imagined it all, but I didn't. I lived it. I survived it. There was a moment, a few weeks after he left, when I sat on the bathroom floor with a pile of our old photos. He looked so perfect in them, so attentive, hands on my waist, smiling into my eyes. And I hated myself for still missing him, for missing the version of him that only existed in public, the version that held my hand but never my heart, the version that brought me flowers after days of silent treatment, just to reset the cycle. Because that's what manipulation looks like in a toxic relationship. Reward and punishment, until you can't tell love from control. One day he would kiss my forehead and say I was his soulmate. The next he would disappear emotionally, punishing me with indifference until I begged for crumbs of affection. I didn't love him. I loved the relief of not being ignored. That's how deep the control went. They starve you just enough to make you grateful when they feed you pain. When a narcissist loves you, it's not you they love. It's your surrender. Even therapy didn't work at first. I couldn't stop defending him. I'd say, he had a rough childhood, or he's not a bad person, he's just misunderstood. But deep down, I knew I was still holding on to the fantasy that if I had just been more patient, more loving, more quiet, maybe he would have loved me back. That fantasy nearly destroyed me. Now, when I hear the word narcissist, I feel a tightness in my stomach, because it's not just a label. It's a mirror I didn't want to look into. It's the shadow that creeps in when I try to open myself to someone new. It's the voice that says, don't trust them. Don't speak too much. Don't feel too deeply. It's the fear that the next man will smile the same way Daniel did, right before turning cold again. Sometimes I dream of him. Not the real him, but the version I created to survive. The kind version. The attentive one. The one who played with my hair and said he couldn't imagine life without me. I wake up from those dreams feeling sick, because I know that version wasn't real. He only showed up when he needed to reset my hope, to keep me there, to make me doubt my suffering. He never loved me. He loved the reflection of himself in my eyes, and maybe one day I'll stop flinching. Maybe one day I'll stop carrying this trauma like a fragile glass inside my chest. But for now, I'm still learning how to take up space again, how to raise my voice, how to be seen without fear. I'm not ready to forgive him. Maybe I never will, but I'm learning how to choose myself, even in silence. And that, for now, is the loudest thing I've ever done. There are days I still whisper apologies into the air, to no one, for nothing, because he trained me to feel guilty just for existing. I'll bump my knee on a chair and say, sorry, out loud. Drop a spoon in my own kitchen and flinch, expecting a voice to bark. Careless. But the room stays quiet. Not the kind of silent treatment he used to weaponize, but actual silence. Neutral, peaceful, and yet unfamiliar. That's what life after narcissistic abuse feels like. Walking barefoot through a house that no longer punishes you, while your body still expects to bleed. Sometimes I catch myself rehearsing my words in my head before I speak, like I used to do with him. I'd pause mid-sentence and restart, trying to avoid his sighs, his smirks, his cutting interruptions. Do you ever think before you talk? He'd snap, and I'd swallow my words. Eventually I stopped speaking altogether unless I was sure it was safe. Now, even alone, I sometimes hesitate. The emotional abuse doesn't just leave because he did. It stays, echoing in every part of me that he touched, without ever lifting a finger. He never hit me. He never needed to. His control was in the pauses, in the glances, in the way he'd leave a room just when I needed him most. That was his punishment. Absence, silence, cold detachment. Psychological abuse so insidious that even now, I wonder if it was real enough to count. But it was. It is. One of the last times I saw him, I had run into him at a mutual friend's party. He looked exactly the same. Confident, charming, magnetic. He walked up to me like nothing had ever happened and said, "You look good. You always did." Just like that. No apology, no ownership. Just a line, like a hook tossed back into the sea to see if I'd bite again. I didn't, but I wanted to. That's the part I'm still ashamed of. How part of me missed being wanted by the person who once made me feel worthless. Because when you've been the victim of a narcissist, love becomes something you beg for, not something you receive freely. Affection feels like a transaction. Attention feels like oxygen. And even when you escape the toxic relationship, your body still craves the high of those rare moments when he looked at you like you mattered. But I didn't matter. Not to him. I mattered to his ego, to his image, to the performance he gave to others. I was a stage prop in his show, there to validate him, to admire him, to fall apart just enough for him to feel powerful. A narcissist doesn't want a partner. They want an audience. I wasn't loved. I was used. There are layers of grief no one warns you about. Grieving the person you thought he was. Grieving the person you became around him. Grieving the time you lost. Not just months or years, but the parts of yourself you'll never get back. The joy that dulled. The trust that shattered. The voice that went quiet. I remember once I was sick with the flu. Feverish. Weak. Barely able to stand. I asked him if he could bring me soup. He looked at me from the doorway and said, "You're not dying. Stop acting like a child." Then he left. I spent that night curled up on the bathroom floor, shivering, alone. That's when I learned that being with a narcissist means suffering doesn't make you more lovable. It makes you inconvenient. He only cared when I was shining. When I was broken, I became a mirror he didn't want to look at. The healing is slow. Some days I feel strong, like I'm climbing out of something heavy. Other days I feel like I'm still in that house, still tiptoeing around a man who isn't even there. The trauma rewired me. I know that now. And undoing that wiring is like learning how to breathe again, but differently. I no longer answer to his name. I no longer dress for his approval. I no longer shrink in the presence of male voices, but I still have dreams where I'm back in that bed, reaching for his hand, and feeling him pull away. And I wake up, not crying, but numb. That's the scar he left me. Not pain, not rage, numbness. And that's the hardest thing to heal from, learning how to feel again, without fear. I'm trying. Some days I even laugh without guilt. Some days I put on lipstick, just because I want to. Some days I speak too much, too loud, and I let myself be messy and imperfect, just to prove I'm alive. But I still haven't found the version of myself I lost in him, and I don't know if she's coming back. She had a laugh I barely remember now. Loud, unfiltered, a little embarrassing, the kind that made strangers turn and smile. He hated that laugh. The first time he heard it, he winced and said, "God, do you always laugh like that?" I apologized. Not just that day. I spent years apologizing for being too much, for taking up space, for having emotions that didn't serve his ego. That's the difference between love and narcissistic abuse. In love, you're allowed to expand. With a narcissist, you are only allowed to shrink. Even now, when something is funny, really funny, I catch myself covering my mouth. I silence myself before anyone else can. There was a time when I thought he was my soulmate. He mirrored everything I loved, admired everything I said, wanted everything I wanted, until he didn't. Until every mirror became a weapon. Until everything he once adored about me became exactly what he used to cut me down. My independence became arrogance. My success became threatening. My sensitivity became manipulative. That's the trap. The narcissist doesn't fall in love with you. He falls in love with how you make him feel. The moment you stop serving that purpose, he turns. And he turned fast. I remember our last vacation together. Portugal. He had planned it, picked the hotel, the restaurants, everything. He said it was a gift, something we deserved. But it wasn't for us. It was for the photos, the illusion, the version of us that people envied online. Behind every smiling picture was a fight. Behind every candlelit dinner, silence. I cried in a hotel bathroom on the second night after he accused me of flirting with a waiter. I had said, "Thank you," too sweetly. That was enough. Enough to trigger the storm, the control, the rage disguised as jealousy, the punishment that came later, his withdrawal, his coldness, the silent treatment that lasted the rest of the trip. I smiled in the photos. He posted them with captions like "Blessed" and "My Queen." Emotional abuse wears a mask. And the world clapped for him while I slowly died inside. He never had to raise his voice to destroy me. They break you in silence, and no one sees the bruises. When I finally left, I expected anger. I expected heartbreak. But what came was worse. Indifference. "You're being dramatic," he said. "You'll be back when you calm down." That's when I realized. He never believed I'd leave because he never saw me as someone with power. In his eyes, I was already erased. But I left anyway. And the grief that came wasn't just for the relationship. It was for the version of myself that didn't survive him. The girl who used to trust her gut. The woman who used to believe that love meant safety. The human who believed words were real. The hardest part of narcissistic abuse is that it makes you grieve someone who is still alive, because the version of him who loved you only ever existed in the beginning, or in your hopes. You spend months, years, waiting for that person to come back. They never do, because they never existed. I've since started writing again. Nothing big, just scraps in a notebook. Lines I can't say out loud. Things like, "You made me mute, but my pain still has a voice. The loudest thing I ever did was leave you. I don't date yet. I'm still learning what it means to be alone without being lonely. Still untangling the knots he left inside me. Still trying to forgive myself for staying so long, for confusing gaslighting with love, manipulation with passion, control with protection. Still unlearning the instinct to beg for affection that should have been freely given. And sometimes I miss him. Not the man, but the illusion. The dream he sold me. The comfort of pretending I wasn't alone even when I was. But now, when that ache comes, I breathe through it. I don't call. I don't break. I don't go back. I stay. With myself. Even when it hurts. And maybe that's what healing really is. Not forgetting. Not forgiving too fast. But staying present in the aftermath. Holding your own hand when no one else will. I still wake up in the middle of the night sometimes. Heart pounding. Reaching for the version of myself I used to be. But these days, I reach a little less for him, and a little more for me. Some mornings I still wake up expecting to feel dread, that invisible weight pressing on my chest before the day even begins. That's how it used to be with him. The moment I opened my eyes, I would scan for his mood. Was he speaking to me today? Would I get a kiss? Or a cold shoulder? Would breakfast be quiet? Or filled with passive-aggressive sighs? My nervous system was trained to detect storms in silence. I don't live with him anymore, but my body remembers. The way he'd sit at the table, scrolling through his phone, not even glancing at me. If I tried to start a conversation, he'd mumble, "Can I just have 5 minutes without your noise?" 5 minutes would turn into the whole day, a punishment disguised as a request. That was his specialty. Silent treatment as discipline. I learned to speak less, to disappear, because nothing was more terrifying than his silence. You don't realize you're in a toxic relationship when the silence becomes your safest option. He conditioned me to believe that my feelings were flaws, that my pain was inconvenient. I remember one night, I cried quietly in the bathroom after he accused me of being clingy for asking if he still loved me. I didn't sob. I didn't yell. I just let tears fall, pressing my hand over my mouth, like I'd done something shameful by needing love. When I came out, he looked at me and said, "Are you done with the performance?" And that sentence carved itself into my spine. They don't ask you to be strong. They punish you for being weak. With a narcissist, your suffering becomes their proof that they are the victim. That's the thing about narcissistic abuse. It inverts everything. They hurt you, then make you apologize for bleeding. They withdraw, then accuse you of being distant. They lie, then question your memory. It's not just the gaslighting. It's the erosion of reality, the way your truth becomes something fragile, something unstable, something theirs. It took me so long to understand that what I was living wasn't just a rough patch or a difficult personality. It was abuse. Emotional abuse so sophisticated, so quiet, it almost convinced me I was the crazy one. I kept journals during that time, hidden in the back of a drawer. I'd write things I was too afraid to say out loud. I found one recently. In shaky handwriting, I'd written, "I don't think he sees me. I don't think he cares. But if I say that, he'll just say I'm dramatic. So I stay quiet, and I smile, and I make dinner." That entry was dated 2 months before I finally left. Leaving wasn't brave. It was survival. I didn't pack a suitcase with strength. I packed it with fear. Fear that if I stayed one more week, I'd forget completely how to speak, how to feel, how to choose myself. And still, even in my escape, I doubted myself. I kept thinking, maybe I exaggerated. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe he wasn't that bad. That's the most insidious part of psychological abuse. It steals your certainty, your clarity, your ability to name what's happening to you. Sometimes people ask me why I stayed so long. I don't have a clean answer. I stayed because I loved him. I stayed because I was trauma bonded. I stayed because leaving would have meant admitting I had lost myself, and I wasn't ready to face that yet. But I left. That's what matters. And now I'm learning to take up space again. I leave dishes in the sink without guilt. I laugh loudly. I cry without shame. I wear perfume that lingers. I speak when I'm scared. I rest without apologizing. I listen to songs he said were too emotional. I dance in my kitchen alone. But the healing isn't linear. Some days I still sit in the quiet and wonder if I imagined it all. That's the echo of manipulation, the shadow of control. The trauma doesn't leave all at once. It unpacks itself, slowly, in the safest corners of your life. I've started talking to other women who went through the same. I don't always tell my full story, but sometimes, when I hear someone say, "I don't know what's wrong, I just feel so small around him," I feel the air freeze in my chest, because I know that sentence. I've lived that sentence, and I survived it. You don't escape a narcissist with rage. You escape with quiet clarity. The real freedom isn't leaving them. It's no longer believing them. I don't need his voice in my head anymore. I'm learning to trust mine. And maybe that's the beginning of coming back to life. Continue chat. Some nights, when the world is finally quiet and the mask I wear during the day comes off, I still find myself reaching for something that isn't there. A closure that never came. An apology that never arrived. A love that was never real. The absence of his chaos should feel like peace. But sometimes it just feels like a void where my identity used to be. That's what happens after narcissistic abuse. You leave the abuser, but the abuse doesn't leave you. I still remember the way he used to touch my lower back in public. Gentle, possessive, intentional. It looked like love, but it wasn't love. It was control, subtle, performed, strategic, a way to mark territory, to remind me, even in front of others, that I belonged to him. And I did. For far too long, I belonged to someone who didn't believe I had the right to belong to myself. He never said, "You can't leave." He didn't have to. He made the world outside of him seem colder than the cruelty inside our home. That was the genius of his manipulation. He isolated me without ever locking a door. He poisoned every friendship with quiet comments like, "She's jealous of us," or, "You don't see how fake they are." Soon I stopped reaching out. I stopped trusting anyone but him. And when I needed support most, there was no one left. That's how a narcissist wins. Not by overpowering you, but by shrinking your world until he's the only thing in it. He didn't cage me. He convinced me I was safer inside. That's the true horror of narcissistic abuse. You think you're choosing it. I found a voice recording once, months after I left. I had recorded a conversation without even realizing. Just the phone in my pocket during another one of his cold, calculated shutdowns. I played it back with trembling hands, thinking maybe I had exaggerated. But no, there it was. The low, flat tone of his voice, the sharp dismissiveness, the way he said, "You're exhausting," like it was fact, not cruelty. And then, my voice, barely audible, apologizing again and again. For what? For needing kindness? For asking why he was ignoring me? That's what broke me. Not the shouting, not the silence, but the realization that I had started to apologize for being human. I still carry that shame like a bruise under the skin, invisible, but tender to the touch. I've learned now that healing from a toxic relationship isn't a straight line. It's a spiral. You revisit the same pain, again and again, from different angles. Some days I feel powerful, like I escaped a slow death. Other days I feel hollow, like I left a part of myself behind in that house, the part that once believed in love without fear. I try to forgive her, the woman I was, the one who stayed, the one who rationalized every red flag, who made excuses for every wound. She wasn't weak. She was surviving. She was doing what victims of psychological abuse are conditioned to do: adapt, absorb, endure. But I'm not her anymore. Now I ask questions. I speak when I'm uncomfortable. I say no without guilt. I've built a little life with quiet routines. Coffee in the morning sun, books by the window, walks where no one rushes me. There's no chaos, no punishment, no gaslighting. Sometimes the peace feels unnatural, like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. That's the aftermath of control. It rewires your brain to associate calm with danger, silence with rejection. I'm learning, slowly, to trust the quiet. After a narcissist, peace feels suspicious. You mourn the chaos because it's all you've known. I wish I could say I never think of him, but I do. Sometimes in dreams, sometimes in flashes when I hear a certain tone or smell a specific cologne. And when I do, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel grief. For the girl who thought love was something you earned by hurting quietly. For the woman who mistook punishment for passion. For all the versions of myself I abandoned to keep him comfortable. But now, finally, I'm coming back to life. No one applauds you for surviving emotional abuse. There's no ceremony, no closure. You just wake up one day and realize you're breathing without fear. That you laughed and didn't check to see if someone disapproved. That you cried and didn't apologize for it. Healing looks like freedom, but it feels like unfamiliar territory. And still, step by shaky step, I'm learning how to belong here. Not to him, not to anyone, just to myself. Yesterday, for the first time in a long time, I sat in silence, and I wasn't afraid of it. It wasn't his silence, not the cold, calculated, silent treatment he used as punishment, not the kind that froze my stomach, made my hands tremble, made my heart race because I knew I was about to be erased again. It was a different kind of silence, lighter, almost sacred, a quiet space where there used to be tension, where I used to tiptoe through the hours, terrified of triggering a storm I couldn't see, but could always feel coming. I was alone, and I was at peace. It took me years to teach my body that silence could be safe, that it wouldn't always be followed by slammed doors, cruel smirks, or a long list of everything I had done wrong. Years to untangle his voice from my thoughts, the gaslighting, the sarcasm, the emotional withdrawal that used to steal the air out of my lungs. But I still carry the aftershocks. I still catch myself apologizing for speaking too much. I still hesitate before answering messages, afraid of sounding needy. I still look in the mirror and hear the echo of his voice. You're not special. People just pretend to like you. That's how narcissistic abuse hides, not in bruises, but in doubts. In the way you start to question everything about yourself. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I am hard to love. Maybe I deserved it. He was a master of manipulation. Subtle, patient, precise, until I couldn't tell the difference between fear and love. Even now when I feel happy, that joy arrives with guilt clinging to its edges, as if I need permission to feel good, as if the trauma still whispers, don't relax. It never lasts. With a narcissist, even your smile becomes a threat. The pain he caused still speaks in my voice. I haven't forgotten. I haven't forgiven. And maybe I never will. But I've learned. I've learned that love isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of care. I've learned that someone who truly loves you doesn't have to silence you to feel powerful. I've learned that the fear of losing someone should never be greater than the fear of losing yourself. He moved on, like narcissists do. Clean, charming, untouchable. No one sees the wreckage. No one imagines what he was behind closed doors. He tells his version of the story now, where I'm the unstable one, the over-emotional one, the ungrateful one. And for a long time, I almost believed him. But now I know. I was a victim. I was manipulated, silenced, diminished, and I survived. There are still days when the memories grip tight, when doubt creeps in, when my body remembers pain before my mind does. But this time, I don't silence myself. The wound hasn't scarred yet. It still stings. It still bleeds. But now, it's mine, not his, and I will learn to live with it, even if it bleeds, even if it hurts. But this time, in a silence that belongs to me,